What are some inspiring words by Mr. Gupta? We are honored to have him live in the studio along with Ms. Sarsour to have a short Q&A. Thank you so very much, Mr. Gupta and Ms. Sarsour, for staying and answering some questions. I really appreciate, and it gives us all Asian Americans of all different ethnicities, wide variety of ethnicities, the power, the courage to speak up. My first question and we have about 2 minutes per question, so 1 minute each panelist. That you've been, how did you decide, and what tactics did you use to become more assertive and visible in the American politics or in the American corporate world as Asian American? We'll start off with Mr. Gupta.
It wasn't easy for us because we were all spread across the country, and honestly, the three of us who were part of the Chairman's Diversity Council realized that three of us had the role to speak up. So we reached out to the other Asian American vice presidents, and we had a not a Zoom meeting, but a online session across the country, and we decided it was time for us to speak up and get our seat at the table as Asian American employees and not just as somebody else. So it was, again, strength in numbers. The more of us unite to speak up together, the more our voice will be heard.
Your experience in this. Thank you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, and I'm very, very humbled and honored just to be in this virtual space with you. For me, my parents are immigrants, and they lived under a military occupation, and they sacrificed everything for me. So my courage comes from making my parents' sacrifices worth it. They came to America because America promised them freedom. They promised them liberation. It promised them opportunities that they would not have had access to, nor would I have had access to if I was born in my parents' home country. And so for me, my courage comes from my parents. It comes from the communities that I belong to. And I also believe in this country that me, Mr. Gupta, all of you, we make up this country. This country was built on the backs of Black people and immigrants. So I feel courageous to speak up. I feel that our communities and our families have given everything to this country. We have given our talent, our skills, and we love this country. And it is our responsibility to ensure that this country loves us and our children back.
Ms. Sarsour and Mr. Gupta, my second question for both of you, and we'll reverse order, we'll go Linda first, is, I talked about just a little bit about, we're here at the table, we are, being part of the conversation. What part of the conversation, or what dish are you bringing to this Thanksgiving meal now?
We bring everything to the table, really. There can't be a table without the voices of Asian Americans. There cannot be tables without, our communities. And so for me, I always say to people that the tables are not just the tables that we want to sit at. The question is, what tables are you building? And so for me, if there's a table where I don't feel that our people are being respected or our people are being centered, I build my own table. We do have the power. We do have the influence to build in the different industries we're a part of, in the media, tell our own stories, and not allow folks to tell our stories for us. And so for me, I bring courage to the table. I bring the communities that I come from to the table. We bring a global analysis to understand that it's not just about what we experience here in the United States of America, but how that's connected across the world to what's happening across the world. So I want everyone here, and I'll end by saying this, everyone who's at this conference today, to understand that you are worthy, you are brilliant, and this country should be absolutely grateful to have you and to have your families.
Mr. Sarsour, Mr. Gupta, what are you bringing to the meal?
I think what I'm bringing is an opportunity for all Asians to define themselves as Asians. I was really proud to hear Linda say that she's from West Asia. We have often I've often been asked, what defines an Asian? And my response has always been, you define it. I don't want to define it. If you think you're an Asian, you're an Asian. And collectively, we all must help each other. That's why I always want to start. It is us helping each other that will make a difference. It won't be a handout from anybody. No one's going to give us a handout. We need to step up, bring something to the table, and participate in the table, at the table, as a full-fledged member of the Thanksgiving feast.
Yes. Yes. So all of you all are invited to Portland, Oregon for Thanksgiving feast at my house in that case, at Muslim Educational Trust. Actually, I'll just put that there. My last question and if we have any more questions, I'll ask that as well. My last question is, what are your advice for young Asian Americans, first generation, second generations, to voice their Asian Americanness, but also what path they should take to be more inclusive, to be part of the fabric? We'll start off with Mr. Gupta this time.
What I told my kids, I have two grown-up kids now and now grandkids. Uh, what I told them was, people keep saying have work-life balance, have work-life balance. There is no such thing. There is work and there's life. And every year I tell them, take the time to figure out what's your work-life balance. And as part of life, it's not just your family, your kids, but it's also your community. So you have to figure out how to give back to the community. And I'm really proud to say that my daughter in New York takes her kids to some of the protests and parades to basically make them at their young age, our grandkids, smart and conscious of the political challenges that not only Asian Americans but also women face in this country. So what I would tell any young person is, work hard, work smart, but also find some time to give back to the community, because it is the community that will collectively help us all raise the rising tide that will our boats will rise also.
Thank you, Mr. Soor.
I have the privilege of traveling to college campuses across the country. And of course, in the global pandemic, doing it virtually. I am very invested in the generations that come after me. And what I tell young people, young Asian Americans, young Muslim Americans, and particularly those of us who are either children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants, that your parents and grandparents sacrificed everything for you to live in this country of a land of opportunities, and for you to understand that that sacrifice means something. And so I want you to hold your back straight and hold your head held high, because we all have everything to be proud of. My parents do not have high school diplomas, and I am still proud of them and their sacrifices, because they wanted something different for me. And so I want you to walk in this world. And I tell this to my own children. My children, Mr. Gupta, are also, believe it or not, adults now. My son is 22 years old. I have a daughter who's 20 years old and a daughter who's 17 years old. And my children, every time they walk out of my house, they always hear me say these things. I say, hey, straighten your back, put your shoulders back, and hold your head held high, because you have everything to be proud of. And that's what I want our children to understand, that we are a community. We come from communities of hospitality, of generosity. We come from villages that have raised us. And so in this country, the reason why we can call this one of the greatest nations on earth is because of those contributions that our grandparents and great-great-grandparents have made to these United States of America. So stay proud, stay unapologetic about who you are. You belong, and one day this country is going to catch up to you, not the other way around.
Thank you. I have one last question from our audience for Mr. Soor and Mr. Gupta separately. Mr. Soor, the question for you is, that what path that led you to become a leading voice of social justice? Briefly,
You know,
you're running out
yes.
of time.
Yes, definitely. Just to be clear, I never dreamed to be an American political activist or a community organizer. I wanted to be a high school English teacher. The reason why I am in this position right now is after the horrific attacks of 9/11 and being a New Yorker and watching the communities that I came from, literally the ones that I lived in and came from, targeted by really every level of law enforcement. It forced me to use my understanding of my Arab American culture and community, obviously my faith, and just being a daughter of immigrants and living in an immigrant community, and also being bilingual, which is something that a lot of us as Asian Americans have, that we are able to speak 2 or 3 languages, and using that to kind of help my community. So unfortunately, my circumstance of being a political activist was not my choice. And unfortunately, for many of us, it's not always our choice that we want to fight. I don't want to fight. I want to just live. I want to have joy. I want to go to work and support my family. But unfortunately, and knowing the history of this nation, there always has to be a group of us that have to stand up and speak out. And we have to hold those in power accountable. And so my journey has really been learning as I fly this plane. I did not study community organizing. I didn't study activism. I don't have a degree in activism. I have a degree in English literature. But I am grateful for the folks that decide to stand up, whether you're standing up in the corporate boardroom or you're standing up on, in front of City Hall in New York City or going to Washington, D.C. We need your voices. Not everybody has to be a full-time activist. And that's the important thing. I don't need you to be a full-time activist, but I need you to have the courage to fight for somebody that you do not know. And if Mr. Gupta wasn't fighting for Asian Americans and giving us the courage in the corporate boardroom, we don't know where, and we might not see the path of where to go. If I wasn't standing outside fighting as a Muslim American woman wearing a hijab, I don't know if young sisters would see that they also too have the opportunity to stand up regardless of who they are and what they choose to wear, and fight for their rights. So again, this wasn't a choice of mine, but I'm very grateful and honored to be in this space today.
Thank you, Mr. Soor. Quickly, Mr. Gupta, 30 seconds or less, and we'll have another presentation coming up. How would you, what led you to this path?
I've always lived my life in a very simple way, simple maxim of fair and reasonable. And when I discovered that the Asian Americans were not getting their fair and reasonable share of promotions in the corporate world, that to me was something I could not keep quiet about, and I had to actively engage and do something about. So being fair and reasonable in every way includes being fair and reasonable for promotions and leadership in the corporate world.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Thank you, Mr. Soor, for your courageous words. We really appreciate your presence today.